Rome might not have been built in a day, but our custom structure is going to be built with a few clicks. Let's see how to do that. Alright, we found ourselves in Minecraft again? Yes, we actually have to start in Minecraft this time because we are talking about custom structures, and the first thing you're going to need is a custom structure. Now, while this is definitely not the most impressive structure that you have ever seen, it is fairly custom. I've put a few custom blocks in there. I mean, it's basically almost all made out of custom blocks. So I've put some fences in here, some of our stairs. I've got some nice windows here, and of course also our fire block that if I can stand on it, I'm actually put on fire. This is the structure that we want generated in the world. And well, we first have to save this. And the way we save this is actually we have to get ourselves a block that many of you might not know about, and that is the structure block. So you're gonna go into Minecraft and you're gonna give yourself the structure block. There it is. And this is the block that we're gonna need in order to save this structure here. And we then want to basically put the structure block into one corner here so that you get, well, basically one corner, and then on the opposite side, we want to put it at the top. So we just fly up here and making sure that we have everything in it. So let's see, this should be fine. All right. And then if we right click this block, you can see that here we can specify a certain name. There's save mode, load mode. We want corner mode. And this is going to be house, just like this. There you go. Structure name house. And then we say done. And then I'm going to go to the other one and we're going to say corner mode, house again. And we say done. And then we're going to take another structure block and we're just going to set it down anywhere basically. And we right click and go to save mode, and then we're going to say house. So this needs to be the same as in both of the corners, and if we then say detect, then you can see that the house has been detected, and you're going to get these outlines here. At the moment, actually, the floor would not be taken, so we're just going to delete this guy and set it down one more, and then we're going to say corner mode house again, and we're going to say done. So you can also change this, and then we can say detect again, and then the actual floor is taken into account as well. So you can clearly see where the structure is, and you can also change a few things. So for example, we could include entities, so we could spawn a pig in there or a sheep or something like that. And if we say on, then that would also be generated. Once we generate it, we can also turn invisible blocks on. Let me just do it like this. There you go. And then you can see, okay, so those would be air blocks. And there is something else, which is the structure void. So as you can see, this guy. And we can place this down. And the idea of the structure void is that, well, right now, this is all air. And the air actually also gets saved. However, if we, for example, wanted to spawn this underwater, then every block here is actually an air block, and that would actually be replaced with air. So even though there would be water usually there, now it's replaced with air. And if we put these structure voids in there, then actually it simply gets completely erased, and whatever is already there will simply stay there. That's sort of the idea here. And yeah, so you need to build your structure. You can, of course, also take this. I will have a download to this structure. And of course, everything we're going to write is in the description below. We have a GitHub repository and also a gist for each of the files. And then also this is the NBT file that we're going to save right now. This is also available because what you're going to do is you're going to right click on the structure block here. And then you're going to save. And then as you can see, structure saved as Minecraft house. This has now been saved as an NBT file. And we can now use this basically to generate our structure. So let's switch back to IntelliJ. All right, we found ourselves back in IntelliJ, and now let's see, where is this actually located? Well, we have to go into our run folder, and then into our saves folder, and this is in the, well, whatever world you have just made, and then in the generated Minecraft structures, and there it is, house NBT. And that's the actual file, which is of course available for download for you. But you can of course also make your own structure that also works. And this has to be located, so we have to actually relocate this into our data folder, tutorial mod, and then new directory, structures, and then simply locate it there. So we're gonna just drag it down here, and I'm actually going to copy it. So I'm gonna hold Control to copy it over. House is totally fine, so the name is absolutely okay. Yeah, and that is now located in here, and now we can start to program. To give you a full disclosure, this has been done with the help of the structure tutorial mod here by Telepathic Grunt. this has been incredibly useful to sort of use as a skeleton or as a basic framework on how this works. The GitHub repository of this is also linked in the description below. This is really useful as well, and yeah, just wanted to mention that. Right, now back to our regularly scheduled program, which is of course making the structure. And the first thing for the structure that we're going to need is we're going to need a class for this structure, and that's going to happen in the world package. We're going to create a new package called structure, and then inside of that package we're actually going to create another package called structures. So structure and then structures, and in the structures package right here, there the individual classes go, and usually the class is called house, so the name of the structure and then structure at the end. And this class is going to be very interesting. So this is going to extend structure no feature config. There you go. And then we'll import this by pressing Alt-Enter. And then what we're going to do is we're going to implement the methods that we need to implement. We need to implement the getStartFactory method here. And then we need to also create a constructor matching super. Now, what I'm going to do in this tutorial is going to be a little bit different than I usually do. I'm actually going to copy over individual parts of methods or even entire methods, and I'm going to explain them, because this is far more complicated than I think that almost anything we've done before. And I think that that makes more sense. So I really advise to you to either open the GitHub repository in each of the classes that are relevant to this, or open the gist.github.com, which basically simply has all of the classes individually separated, and you can basically also copy over from there. So that, I think that makes the most sense, because no one in their right mind just types everything out here. It doesn't make any sense, because it's going to be very similar anyway, and as long as you know individual parts, I think that that's going to be totally fine. So the first thing in here, we're going to change the actual constructor here, no codec here, and we're simply going to say no feature config.codec. So that's the first one in the HouseStructure class right now. And then the other thing that we want is we want a getDecoration stage. So I'm going to copy this over. This simply returns the generation stage.decoration surface structures. This should make absolute sense, because of course we've seen with the other generation that we've done in the world generation, there were different generation stages. And in this case, this would be the surface structures, which I think that makes sense. Then the next thing that we want is we want a sadly unmapped method, and that is going to be func23036 underscore, so something crazy here. So what are we doing here? I mean, roughly speaking, the only thing that's really happening here is we're getting the center of the chunk, seen by the name center of the chunk. Then we're going to say, okay, how high is the actual land? Then we're going to say, okay, we're basically going to take that and look whether or not there is any fluid there. So we're saying get fluid state is empty. So we're basically saying, okay, we don't want any fluid there, otherwise we're not even going to bother. We can also middle mouse button click on this method and see where it has been used. And it has been used in this structure method right here. And this is a structure start. So structure start, more or less, is basically when the structure starts to generate. And you can see this only does start when this is true. Idea being that if the fluid state is empty, so there's no fluid there, then we can start. That's basically the gist of this method. We then have the start factory, which we're gonna kind of ignore, because what we need is we need a subclass in this class, and that's going to be the start class. So we can actually type this out, public static class, and this is going to be called start, and this extends the structure start, and with, once again, a generic no feature config. Now, the start class, of course, also requires a few things, mainly this unmapped method as well, and also, of course, a constructor matching super. Now, the constructor, I'm going to rename. I'm actually going to copy over the constructor because the unnamed parameters are driving me insane. I really don't like this. And this func, the same thing. Of course, this is all available for you to download, so you don't necessarily have to get this with the unmapped names. I really hate the unmapped names in the method parameters. That's just so the constructor here can actually stay just as it is. That's totally fine. The interesting thing is this one. This would be called generate pieces. So this is the actually mapped method name. And this is going to be kind of interesting. So we're going to get the first 3 lines. So this is going to be the X, Z, and then the block pass here. So as you can see, a nice comment here is there turns the chunk coordinates into actual coordinates we can use. So this basically gets the center of the chunk. This is what we've basically seen here as well. So the center of the chunk here is pretty much the same. As you can see, chunk X4. So we're bit shifting here. It's not that important what this really means. Let's just say, okay, we're getting the center of the chunk. So this one now is the center of the chunk. And now the first big thing comes in, and that is going to be the call of this method here. And as you can see, this is quite a bit. So let's see what this is. This is the Jigsaw Manager. Right, so the Jigsaw Manager, why are we using this? Well, the jigsaw pieces are usually used when you have multiple different parts of a structure. So you, for example, have a huge structure and you actually want to save that in 2 different parts. Then you can use the Jigsaw Manager. Right, we can still use it even though we only have one big thing. Then we simply don't need to use jigsaw blocks, that's all. So right, so what is happening here? Right, so this is the add pieces method. This would be the map name. So first of all, okay, we're gonna give it the dynamic registry manager, okay, fair enough. And then we're gonna have a new village config. Very interesting. The idea being that we're going to look for a house/start pool. So this is a actual JSON file that we need, and we can actually create this right now. So this is in our data folder, tutorial mod, and then a new directory. This is going to be world gen, and then inside of this one, we're going to have a template underscore pool, and then inside of there, we're going to have the name of our structure, which is house, and inside of there, we're going to copy over the JSON file called start underscore pool. Now this already has everything that is in it. So basically the name of our pool here, the location, so this is tutorial mod house, and then what is this? This is a single pool element, and the fallback is empty, so if this can't be generated, then we're just gonna not generate anything. So this is a very simple file. An example is of course also available in the GitHub repository tutorial that I've alluded to earlier, and that is basically what is being called there. The integer here is the size that is specified, and then what we have is we just get some abstract village piece, chunk generator, template manager, and then there's just a few things that we need to put in. So the center of the chunk here, the components, these are the components of this structure, in this case then random, and then false and true. Right, so this is the first real crazy thing. Now there's 2 optional things. This is going to be these 2, and then what we want to do is we want to recalculate the structure size, and then just to have this, we also can basically debug where the actual bounding box of this structure is. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, what this basically does is simply offsets the structure up by 1 and then lowers the bounding box by 1. Right, so overall, this is the method done, and then we actually almost have the entire class done. The only thing we need to do now in the getStartFactory method, we need to call HouseStructure.start and then : new. And there you go. That is basically the HouseStructure class completely done. We actually don't need to do anything in here anymore. And yeah, let's just continue along. Right, next thing in the structure package, new class, and that is the ModStructures. And this will have, which comes to no surprise, a public static final deferred register of type structure ? And this is going to be called structures. And this is equal to deferred register.create forge registries.structure feature and then tutorial mod.modID. And where there is a deferred register, there is also a public static void register method with an iEvent bus called event bus, and then structures.register event bus. This will then be quickly called here. So ModStructures.structures event bus. There you go. And then continuing with the ModStructures class. So first of all, of course, we need a registry object. This is going to be public static final registry object of type structure with no feature config called house, which should make sense. And this is going to be structures.register house and then house structure : new. And of course, let's not forget the semicolon here at the end. Right, the next thing we're going to need is we're going to copy over the setup structure method. So I'm going to copy this over, and we're going to implement this method in just a moment. So this, as you can see, average distance apart in chunks between spawn attempts is the first parameter here. Then we have the minimum distance apart in chunks between spawn attempts. This must be less than the value above. So the idea is that this one has to be less than this one, and then a modified seed. So this simply modifies the seed. As you can see, make this large and unique. So we're simply going to make this 1 through to 0, and that's going to be fine. So this is the setting of how to set how many structures are apart. So you can basically put this in. This is the average distance apart from chunks. So usually you should find a house every 100 chunks or so on average, and this is the minimum. So you're never going to find 2 houses that are closer than 50 chunks. That's the basic idea of the setup structure here. And then, of course, the setup map space and land method is going to be quite crazy. No worries, we're going to copy over the method with nothing in it for the time being. And as you can see, we actually have a nice Java doc here. So adds the provided structure to the registry. That should make sense, and adds the separation settings. So the separation settings we're basically creating here for the how our part in chunks the structure can spawn. The rarity of the structure is based on the values passed into the method by the structure separation settings. That should make sense. So these two values basically determine how rare the structure is. And now we're going to register it more or less. The first line, and this is going to be this one. So this simply adds the structure to the by map. So in the structure class, there is a map, and we're simply putting our structure in there so that it's semi-registered. Then the next thing that we have is we want to set the field here. And then we sort of run into an issue, which we can fix very easily, so don't worry about it. But you can see if I actually want to transform the surrounding land, and usually I do want to transform the surrounding land so that the structure fits in nicely, then what I want is I actually want to modify this here immutable list. If we go in here, this is a public static, but this is sadly a final list of structures, and that's going to be kind of an issue. But we have learned from past experience that we can change that, and we will change that. So inside of our meta.inf folder, AccessTransformers, and we actually need to change 4 different fields this time, and I'm going to copy those over. This is of course also available, so you can check this out as well. Once we have this, we can open the Gradle here and simply reload all Gradle projects, and then it will rebuild. This might take a moment, because of course it needs to transform the axis there. So let's just wait a moment. All right, there it is. It has been done 2 minutes and 9 seconds. So it actually can take a while. So don't be impatient. Wait a second until the build is successful. And then as you can see, the field now is no more final. Exactly what we want. So now we can change it, and this is what we want to do. We can also read the very insightful comment. So whether the surrounding line will be modified automatically to conform to the bottom of the structure. So this is similar to villages and outposts. This is also what you can of course see: the pillager, outpost, village, and the nether fossil. Those are 3 of the basic structures that actually do this. So this is why we want to add this to there. And then the next thing that we want to add is also a quite long comment, number 1, and number 2, also a modification of a field. So as you can see, there it is. So this is the map that holds the default spacing of all structures. So of course, we have a spacing that we have. We always need to add our structure here. Why is that? So other mods can utilize it if needed. Right? And then as you can see, however, while it does propagate the spacing to some correct dimensions from this map, it seems it doesn't always work for code-made dimensions as they read from the list beforehand. So we will also use the world event load. This is going to be something we're going to do in a moment. We're going to use it not in the structure tutorial main. We're actually going to do that in the mod world events to add the structure spacing from our list to the dimension, basically to backlist this properly. If you don't quite understand what this means, basically we're just making sure that regardless of what order something is done in, it's still going to be in there. That's the general gist of it. I think that that's fine. Next thing is going to be a little longer, basically the rest of the method that we want to now implement here, and that is going to be the following. So this is the noise settings. So we're basically getting an entry for each of the noise settings and then making sure that we add the structure there as well. Let's just see what the comment has to say. There are very few mods that relies on seeing your structure in the noise settings registry. However, that might be the case. So you may see some mods add their spacings in here or in here. So basically almost all that we're doing here is to make sure that we are actually making our structure compatible with dimensions of other mods, or if they change the world generation of the overworld, that we're basically still having our structure inserted there. That's sort of the general gist of it as well. So it's not only going to be basically making sure that this is registered and adding these separation settings here, but the idea is that the structure will be registered in such a way that almost regardless of how other mods are maybe changing the world generation, it's still going to register and generate as well. Now, this has been quite the crazy method. This is not the last one that is this crazy, but overall, I can just tell you once again, like always, most of the things that are in here, so the setup, map, spacing, and land method, actually, I would say that's probably more or less set in stone. I wouldn't change anything in here really. This is almost going to be the same. What is going to change are, of course, the structure separation settings here. So these 3 values, or let's say these 2 values, are very interesting for you to modify, basically making sure that you can specify what rarity your structure should spawn in. That is something that you should definitely play around with. So those are two of the things that you definitely can change here. And then of course the question is, where is this called? Well, we go into our tutorial mod class, and then inside of the FML common setup, inside of the event onQ work, we're going to call this so ModStructures.setupStructures, and there you go. So that is actually all we need to do there. And with that, the ModStructure class, I know it's pretty crazy, is done. And now we can go on to the mod world events class. So this is of course a class we already have. And usually we would want to add something in the biome loading event. And we are going to add this, but first we actually want to add another method in here. And that is going to be the addDimensionalSpacing method. I'm just going to copy over this and then add a curly bracket here. And then let's see. So basically what we want is we want to surround the entire method with the following. We first of all want to say, okay, if event.getWorld is an instance of server world, right? Only then will we continue, because then we're going to say, okay, server world. Now I'm going to start copying over some stuff. And the next thing is going to be very interesting. We're actually making a try and catch statement here, and we're getting a method from the chunk generator class, and then basically taking a look at whether or not this is in Terraforged. So what is happening here? Basic gist is, if the player is generating a world with the Terraforged chunk generator, then actually we simply want to return. We don't want to use this because this method actually does not work with the Terraforged world generation. So we're simply going to just leave it be, and that's fine. Next thing that we want to add is this, which is very interesting, and that is going to be prevent spawning our structure in vanilla's super flat world. And there you go. This should be fairly understandable. This simply makes sure that if we make a super flat world, then we don't get our structure spawned. Now you can of course turn this on or off, whether you want to or not. So you can basically just remove this, and that's also fine. The thing about it is that sometimes, people don't like modded structures in vanilla super flat world. So that's just something that, you need to think about. Or you could, of course, also maybe add a config. That could also be something that you might want to do. And then last but not least, the last few lines, which is basically adding our structure to the map. So this is a map that is inside of the server world chunk provider generator, and then we're gonna go in even deeper. So the generator of the chunk provider has a map from structure with structure separation settings, and we're basically simply adding our structure in there. So we're putting the structure that we've made from the mod structures, and then getting the structure separation settings that we've made in the mod structures. So basically this one right here, and we're both getting this and putting it into this map and then saving it back in there. That's the general gist of it. If there are some details that are maybe being lost, I can always just advise middle mouse button click, for example, on the field. You can see that this is the field of a mutable map structure and generation settings. And if we think back to this, right, so this is 236191B. And if we look here, you can actually see here we're actually adding our structure to it. So this is basically the idea where we've added the structure here, and now in the mod world events class, we're actually using our structure separation settings and adding it to this map inside of the chunk generator. That's the general gist. Once again, some things might still be unclear. Don't worry about it. World generation, and especially structures, quite complicated, as you might have seen. But overall, I think that if you take this piece by piece, it's going to be fine. I think that this is actually totally okay. Right, and now we're almost done in the world gen. We want a new class that is going to be the ModStructuresGeneration. Basically keep in line with our previous ways that we've done this, and then we're simply going to copy the flower generation here, because why not, and then call this generate structures. And then instead of the vegetal generation, so the entire thing here is going to be a little bit different. So this is actually going to take the following. This is actually going to take a list of supplier of structure feature question mark, and this is going to be the structures, and that's equal to event.get_generation.getStructures, and then what we want to add is our structure, so structures.add, and then a supplier of our structure with a configuration. So ModStructures.house, crazily enough, .get.with configuration, and then we'll simply take the iFeature configuration, no feature config, because that's exactly the configuration that we have specified in the house. We have no feature config, right? And that's actually what we need in the ModStructuresGeneration. That's actually very easy. Now, so at this point, we're looking at planes. That's totally fine. Let's just keep it like that, and then add this here. Very important if we take a look once again. And now, very important if we think back to the order of things, we actually need to call the ModStructureGeneration first. So ModStructureGeneration.generate structures event, because in the generation stage, the structure generation actually comes even before the OR generation. So that's very important that this has been followed, so the order is correct. And it has been quite a lot, but this should be it. So I think we can now see if it works. Right, and don't forget to create a new world for this, because of course we messed with the world generation, so you need a new world. So let's create it. Alright, we found ourselves back in Minecraft once again, and let's call the locate command, and we can type in tutorial mod, and there you go, house. And the nearest house is right here. So let's click on it and enter, and let's see if we turn around. It's up there. There it is. Okay, so it has actually generated on a little bit of a hill. So I think this has way more to do with a little bit of a wonky placement than anything else. But it has been generated, and as you can see, it's absolutely complete. And if we go in here, everything works. The fire blocks are there. All of the fences are there. And everything that we've placed. And if you actually do download it, there's a hidden secret in there, which of course I'm not going to show, but you can of course take a look and maybe you can find it. But there it is. So the structure actually has been added to the game properly. And there you go. The long-awaited tutorial is finally done. How to add structures to Minecraft. And as you can see, while quite complicated, if you take in sort of a bird's eye view, as soon as you go down into each of the statements that we're actually calling, it's not that bad. We're just making sure that everything is registered properly. We're just making sure that we're setting everything up, and that's basically it. So I would say this has been a great success. This has been a great tutorial. Of course, if there are any questions, feel free to leave me a comment down below. But this would be it for this tutorial right here. I genuinely hope you found this useful and you learned something new. I would of course appreciate a like if you did. And don't forget to subscribe for more tutorials just like this one. And I'll see you next time. So yeah.